I'll give you the Ferrari, if you can make it run. Jonathan Blackwell's laughter rolled through the courtyard of his luxury car dealership, a rich man's amusement echoing off glass and chrome. In the far corner lay the object of his mockery, a red Ferrari, crumpled and lifeless, more monument than machine. 72-year-old Walter Johnson had stopped there only to pick up his granddaughter, the receptionist, when his battered '98 Ford pickup sputtered to its death right at the entrance of Blackwell Luxury Motors. The real estate tycoon saw the moment as an opportunity for sport. "Look, everyone," he called, waving his phone as salesmen and customers gathered. "This gentleman seems to be quite the car expert, doesn't he?" His sarcasm dripped like oil on concrete as Walter tried the ignition again. The Ferrari in question, a 2019 model, had been annihilated in a crash, blown engine, twisted frame, fried wiring. It was little more than a red carcass that Blackwell kept as a trophy from a lawsuit he'd once won. 5 mechanics already said this thing is impossible to fix, he announced, now recording for his social media audience. But maybe someone with your experience can figure it out. Walter stepped out slowly, calm eyes scanning the wreck. The laughter rose when people noticed his calloused hands, his worn clothes. Yet behind those quiet eyes, something shifted, a flicker of recognition. "Sir," Walter said evenly, "may I take a closer look?" "Sure." Blackwell grinned. "Climb right in if you like, just don't cut yourself on the scrap metal." Ignoring the jeers, Walter approached the Ferrari. His fingers brushed the dented hood, a faint smile crossed his withered face. No one there knew that those same fingers had once built masterpieces of precision metalwork. What Blackwell intended as 5 minutes of humiliation would soon stretch into an hour that none of them would ever forget. The mockery that began as a game turned into a spectacle. Customers lingered, filming and posting clips with hashtags like #OldManMechanic and #FerrariImpossible. Half an hour in, Blackwell shouted to the crowd, "And he still thinks he can do it." Admirable determination, don't you think? Laughter thundered across the courtyard. Walter worked methodically, ignoring every word. Piece by piece, he examined the ruined machine with movements so sure that a few observers began to exchange puzzled looks. These weren't the fumbling gestures of guesswork, they were the confident motions of a man who knew exactly what each part was meant to do. One salesman, Ryan, called out over the noise. "Hey, old man. My dad owns a bike shop. I can get you a job there when this doesn't work out." The crowd roared. Walter didn't answer. At 72, he knew that dignity was measured not by what a man said, but by what he did. His silence spoke louder than their laughter. None of them knew that Walter Johnson had spent 45 years immersed in precision engineering, the kind that turns raw metal into miracles of performance. While Blackwell built his empire through inheritance and manipulation, Walter had built his through patience, craft, and truth. 45 minutes, Blackwell announced, flashing his Rolex. Most people quit at 10. Such persistence. Still bent over the engine, Walter finally spoke. "Mr. Blackwell, may I ask you something?" Blackwell hesitated, startled that the man knew his name. "Have you ever built anything with your own hands, something that existed only in your imagination until you brought it to life?" Caught off guard, Blackwell stammered. "I built a real estate empire." "No," Walter replied softly. "That's not building. That's buying." The laughter died. Something in his tone carried quiet authority, the kind that can't be faked. 2 men stood revealed, one who lived by appearances, and one who had spent a lifetime shaping reality with his own hands. 2 hours had passed when Walter finally lifted his head and said quietly, "I'll need a Phillips No. 2 screwdriver, insulated handle." The salesman Ryan blinked, uncertain. I don't know if we have that." "Drawer 3 of the red workbench," Walter replied, eyes still on the engine. "Second shelf, next to the Torx keys." A ripple of surprise spread through the group. How could he know the layout of a workshop he had never entered? Blackwell forced a laugh. "Impressive. You must have worked in many shops to know standard organization so well." But there was strain in his voice now. The arrogance had begun to crack. At that moment, Rebecca Johnson returned from lunch. Seeing the crowd, she pushed her way forward and froze when she saw her grandfather surrounded by laughter. Her heart sank. She knew her boss's cruelty well. "What's happening here?" she demanded. "Ah, an employee." Blackwell grinned, still oblivious. "Your friend here thinks he can fix a Ferrari that 5 expert mechanics called a total loss." Rebecca said nothing. She knew exactly who Walter Johnson was, but saying it now might cost her job. So she stayed silent and watched. Meanwhile, Walter worked deeper into the Ferrari's wiring, his movements sharper, faster, more certain. The laughter faded into whispers. These were not the clumsy motions of a hobbyist. This was mastery. Finally, he turned toward Blackwell. "Do you know what the real problem is?" "This engine wasn't destroyed in an accident," Walter said. "It was sabotaged." The word cut through the crowd like a spark. People leaned closer. Even Blackwell's smile faltered. "Sabotaged? That's absurd." "It was investigated." "Of course it was," Walter replied, holding up a wire. "But whoever looked at it didn't know what to look for. See this?" The wire was cut intentionally, then burned to fake overheating. And here, twist marks from a forced manual brake. Even to the untrained eye, the evidence was clear. The Ferrari hadn't failed. Someone had made it fail. Blackwell's face tightened. "You can't prove any of this." Walter's calm smile returned. "Actually, I can. Every engine has a unique wear signature. You learn to read it like fingerprints when you've spent your life building them." Rebecca's heart pounded. Her grandfather had spent 45 years as Ferrari's chief racing engine designer in Maranello. She realized he wasn't just fixing a car. He was uncovering a crime. "Tell me, Mr. Blackwell," Walter asked, "how much did your insurance pay for this vehicle?" Color drained from the billionaire's face. How could this old man know that? Walter wasn't repairing a wreck anymore. He was dismantling $1 million fraud, one bolt at a time. He kept working, voice steady. 45 years, he murmured. "That's how long I built engines like this one, in Maranello, Italy." Silence. Even the phones lowered. "Impossible," Ryan whispered. But Walter reached into the engine and pulled out a small metal plate. Serial number F209WJ447. The initials WJ aren't random, Walter Johnson. I designed this engine myself in March 2019. Blackwell swayed, speechless. Walter's next words hit like a hammer. "Would you care to explain, Mr. Blackwell, how an engine I built to be fail-safe suffered the only 3 failures that guaranteed the highest insurance payout?" Rebecca finally understood why her grandfather had endured the humiliation so calmly. He'd known from the start. He'd come to expose the truth. Walter pointed to a component. This part was deliberately destroyed. The injection system was forced to overheat at 40% above tolerance for exactly 4 minutes and 17 seconds, long enough to cause catastrophic failure, short enough to look accidental. No one laughed now. The crowd that had gathered for Mockery was witnessing revelation. "You can't prove any of this." Blackwell shouted again, but his voice cracked with fear. Walter's expression stayed steady. "You're right, it would be my word against yours." He reached calmly into his pocket. "If I hadn't already documented everything." He lifted his phone toward one of the cameras still recording. "I just sent detailed photos of this engine and my full analysis to Lorenzo Benedetti, Ferrari's current director of engineering in Maranello." A phone began to ring in Walter's hand. "May I take this?" he said softly. "It's Maranello." He put the call on speaker. "Walter." "Dio mio, I just saw your pictures," an accented voice exclaimed. "That engine, you designed it for American client Blackwell, see? What was it doing in an accident?" "Exactly my question, Lorenzo," Walter replied, his gaze fixed on Blackwell. Especially since this engine has a safety system I built to prevent the very failures that supposedly caused this crash. Walter, are you recording this? Our legal team must see it immediately. That Ferrari was sold under fraudulent insurance. Blackwell lunged forward, trying to end the call, but Walter stepped back lightly. There's more, Walter continued. The current owner claims 5 different mechanics declared this engine beyond repair. Ridiculous. Lorenzo barked. You built it to run 500,000 kilometers without major maintenance. If they said it's dead, they're either incompetent or lying. The words hung heavy in the silence that followed. Even Blackwell could hear the weight of his downfall building around him. At that moment, Rebecca stepped closer, voice steady. Grandpa Walter, do you need help? Every head turned. The silence was complete. Blackwell blinked, confused, then realization dawned. Your granddaughter works here? For 2 years, Rebecca said firmly. And in all that time, I've heard your jokes about people like my grandfather, people you think don't understand real cars. Walter ended the call politely. Thank you, Lorenzo. I'll send you the recording. He slipped the phone into his pocket and faced Blackwell squarely. For 45 years, Walter said, his tone even, I designed 847 engines for Ferrari. I trained hundreds of engineers. I earned 23 international awards for automotive innovation. And at 72, I retired to be close to my family. He paused, letting each word sink in. But I also learned that some engines, no matter how perfect, are ruined by people who value profit over integrity. You can't prove that Blackwell began. Oh, but I can, Walter interrupted, showing his phone again. While you were busy entertaining yourself, I recorded everything you said, including your own admission about that insurance payout. Blackwell went pale. In his arrogance, he had bragged on camera about receiving $2.3 million for a total loss Ferrari. Now his words were evidence. And since we're talking about recordings, Walter added gently, the insurance company will surely appreciate documentation from the man who designed this very engine. The once smirking billionaire stood frozen, realizing too late that his empire was collapsing under the weight of his own arrogance. A man in the crowd finally spoke, holding his phone. Mr. Walter, can I post this online? The world should see what's happening here. Walter smiled softly. Of course. But post this part, too. He turned back to the Ferrari, hands moving with a steady grace born of decades of precision. In less than 10 minutes, the engine that 5 mechanics had declared hopeless roared back to life with a thunderous, flawless growl. The sound was pure symphony, just as set to horsepower. The courtyard filled with the low, perfect hum of redemption. Gasps echoed. Phones lifted again, not to mock but to marvel. Blackwell stood rooted to the ground, watching his fraud unravel before hundreds of witnesses. His humiliation was now irreversible, broadcast live to the world. Rebecca approached, tears glimmering in her eyes. Grandpa, how did you know it was your engine? Walter's smile deepened. When you create something with your own hands, child, you recognize it, even in ruin. Just as you recognize when someone tries to destroy it. The Ferrari's steady purr filled the courtyard like a heartbeat, and for the first time that afternoon, everyone understood who Walter Johnson truly was. Meanwhile, in the quiet between camera clicks, one unspoken question hung in the air. What would happen when Ferrari Corporate, the insurance company, and the authorities received the recordings that were already being shared around the world? 3 weeks later, Walter Johnson sat inside the Los Angeles FBI office, his calm demeanor unchanged. Agents surrounded a massive table covered in documents, photos, and printed transcripts from that infamous afternoon. Mr. Johnson, said Agent Martinez, glancing over her glasses, your technical analysis was crucial. We've uncovered a 5-year insurance fraud operation involving at least 17 luxury vehicles. All sabotaged the same way you described. Walter nodded quietly. He'd long learned that patience could accomplish more than anger ever would. Blackwell himself was arrested yesterday, Martinez continued. resisting arrest, attempted bribery, obstruction of justice, multiple counts of fraud. He'll be behind bars for a long time. She smiled faintly. Apparently, when he realized his accounts were frozen, he tried to bribe the investigator, $200,000 in cash. Walter only sighed softly. Justice, he knew, had its own rhythm, slow, but certain. Across town, Rebecca Johnson's life had also changed. After the dealership's assets were seized, a new group of investors took over, people who valued integrity over image. Their first decision was unanimous: promote Rebecca to general manager. "Grandpa," she said on the phone, laughing through tears, "you won't believe it. That salesman Ryan, the one who mocked you, came to apologize. He says since the video went viral, he can't sleep at night." The video had surpassed 15 million views across all platforms. But it wasn't just the spectacle people remembered. It was the lesson about humility, dignity, and never judging a soul by appearances. Hundreds of retired engineers from Ferrari, Mercedes, BMW, and other manufacturers shared their own stories after watching Walter's video. Stories of being dismissed or underestimated once their working years had ended. Lorenzo Benedetti himself flew from Maranello to Los Angeles to meet the man who had unknowingly sparked a worldwide conversation about dignity and skill. What was meant to be a private reunion turned into a public ceremony when Ferrari decided to officially honor one of its most brilliant minds. Before a crowd of journalists and car enthusiasts, Lorenzo said, "Ferrari owes a great debt to men like you, Walter. Your precision, dedication, and integrity shaped not only our engines, but our reputation across the world." The company then announced the creation of the Walter Johnson Scholarship, a fully funded engineering program for talented young people from disadvantaged backgrounds. The first class would include 10 students, ages 16 to 22, chosen for merit, not social connections. But the real transformation unfolded back in Walter's own neighborhood. For years, he had quietly repaired neighbors' cars in his small garage, charging little or nothing. Now, young people began to flock there to learn. Walter discovered a new passion: teaching. The difference between a good mechanic and a great one, he told his students, isn't in the tools they hold, but in the patience to understand every piece, and the respect they give to the work itself. Among those young learners was Marcus, a 17-year-old whose father had left the family. He became Walter's most devoted pupil. "Mr. Johnson," Marcus asked one afternoon while tightening a bolt, "how did you stay so calm when that man was humiliating you?" Walter chuckled softly, eyes still fixed on the engine. "Marcus, I've learned something in 72 years. People who need to tear others down to feel important have already told you everything you need to know about them. Real strength isn't in reacting, it's in building something so solid that no insult can shake it." Across town, Jonathan Blackwell's world collapsed. His real estate empire imploded as investigators uncovered how he'd funded projects with fraudulent insurance money. He lost everything: his mansion, his cars, his yacht, and, most painfully, his reputation. Clips of his public downfall circulated endlessly online, now used in business ethics courses as a study on how arrogance can destroy an empire faster than any market crash. The internet never forgot the image of the billionaire brought low by the man he had mocked. Ryan, the salesman who had once laughed the loudest, sought both Rebecca and Walter to apologize in person. The meeting took place in Walter's bustling garage, surrounded by young apprentices of every background and color. "Mr. Johnson," Ryan said quietly, "I have no excuse for what I said. But I've learned a lesson I'll never forget." Walter paused his work, then looked at Ryan with the calm wisdom that only years can grant. "Son," he said gently, "we've all judged someone by their appearance at some point. The real difference is in what we do once we realize our mistake. You're here, owning it, trying to be better. That already means more than most people ever do." He extended a grease-stained but steady hand. "If you truly want to make amends, come help teach these kids. Show them what honest sales look like, because one day, they'll run their own shops." Ryan blinked, then nodded. From that day on, he became a regular at Walter's garage, learning humility and integrity along with the young apprentices. 6 months later, under Rebecca's leadership, he earned a well-deserved promotion, not because of flattery, but because of change. The Ferrari that Walter had revived was now displayed permanently at the dealership, proudly renamed Johnson Premium Motors. A plaque beside the car told the full story of that remarkable day, the lesson, the humiliation, the redemption, so that no employee or customer would ever forget what true respect looked like. At the grand reopening ceremony, Walter stood before mayors, business leaders, and journalists. His voice, calm yet strong, carried across the room like an engine's low hum. For 45 years, he said, I built engines that took people to the farthest corners of the world. But now I realize, the most important engine I can help build is the next generation. Young people who understand that real success doesn't come from stepping on others, but from lifting yourself through honest work and dignity. The audience rose to its feet in thunderous applause that lasted more than 5 minutes. Among them were retired doctors, engineers, teachers, and artisans, people who, like Walter, had once been overlooked or dismissed after a lifetime of contribution. Walter Johnson's story had become a symbol of resilience and quiet strength, a reminder that dignity doesn't retire. 6 months later, the Walter Johnson Scholarship had expanded to 50 students, now funded not only by Ferrari but by donations from around the world. The program grew beyond automotive engineering, adding aeronautical, naval, and renewable energy divisions. Marcus, Walter's young apprentice, earned a full scholarship to the California Institute of Technology. In his acceptance letter, he wrote, I learned that true knowledge walks hand in hand with humility, and that the greatest honor is to use your skills to lift others. Then, one morning, Walter received an unexpected letter from Jonathan Blackwell, writing from prison. The words were sincere, stripped of ego. Blackwell admitted that the humiliation at the dealership had revealed not just his financial corruption, but his moral emptiness. He asked for forgiveness. Walter read it quietly. When he replied, his words carried neither bitterness nor indulgence. The first step to rebuilding a life is acknowledging the damage we've done. The second is devoting the rest of our days to repairing it, through actions, not words. Even in mercy, Walter remained a craftsman, shaping redemption with the same precision he once used for engines. At 73, Walter Johnson rose each morning with a new sense of purpose. His small garage school had become a gathering place for engineers, students, and journalists from around the world, people eager to meet the man who had turned an afternoon of humiliation into a movement of inspiration. Rebecca often visited, watching her grandfather guide a new generation of mechanics. The air in the workshop buzzed with curiosity and the soft clink of tools. Each lesson Walter gave carried a story, a quiet truth shaped by decades of patience. Grandpa, Rebecca asked one evening as sunlight streamed through the open door, did you know this would all happen when you accepted his challenge? Walter looked up from an engine part, smiling faintly. Honey, when you live with integrity, you don't need to plan revenge. Life handles that for you, it always puts people exactly where they belong. She laughed softly, realizing how simple and powerful those words were. Around them, the students continued their work, unaware that they were part of something far larger than mechanics. They were rebuilding faith, and effort, and honor, and second chances. The story of Walter Johnson was no longer just about a Ferrari or a billionaire's downfall. It had become a testament to how one person's calm courage can echo across thousands of lives. Dignity, it turned out, is the most unbreakable engine of all. Walter Johnson's story proved something timeless. The best revenge isn't destruction, it's creation. He had transformed decades of prejudice into a legacy of growth and hope. He showed that true greatness doesn't depend on color, age, or wealth, but on integrity, the quiet strength to do what's right, even when no one's watching. His life became living proof that character outlasts arrogance, that skill defeats deceit, and that wisdom shines brightest when tested. The rebuilt Ferrari still gleamed under the dealership lights, its hum steady and strong. Visitors came from across the country to see it, reading the plaque that told of an old man who refused to be belittled and instead chose to build justice with his own hands. Walter often stood by that car, watching young students pose beside it. Remember, he would say, Voice calm and firm, machines can be repaired, but people, too, can be rebuilt if they have the courage to change. And as the world watched, inspired by a story that began with laughter and ended with respect, one truth remained undeniable. Integrity may bend under pressure, but it never breaks. It simply waits, quietly, until the moment it's needed most. Because in the end, as Walter Johnson had shown the world, justice always finds a way to prevail.